bist du ihr aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschehen? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab. Hier ließ sich reine taufen, dass der
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. I'm Matt Pegas.
And this is Dan Balti.
And we're here today with Matt Forney, the editor-in-chief of Terra House. Welcome to the
Thanks
show.
for having me on, guys. You know, it's been a long time coming, especially given how you've hyped this podcast up to me, Matt, for a while now.
Yeah,
but I think you guys are doing good work.
Well, appreciate
Thank
that.
you, Matt.
Yeah. No, I definitely. I think when Dan and I first, or like when we've been kind of playing the podcast for a while, since before Dragon Day, since before my book came out, but only got very serious. Like once we were getting near to actually releasing an episode, I was like, it wasn't so much that I was trying to hype it. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with hyping it. Like, yeah, we do want to hype the podcast and make everyone listen, but like also it was kind of just because I felt that our mission with the podcast, in terms of covering whatever you want to call it, dissident literature, the literature of the faction of the truth, whatever, frog Twitter literature, whatever you want to call it, our goal in covering that, I feel like, I don't think it clashes with Terra House's goal at all. I think they're complementary because we're just a podcast and you're a publisher, with a podcast. Nevertheless, the goals are similar. So I just was like, rather than having
Definitely.
this be something that came out of nowhere, I wanted to be like, let you know, like we're getting in on this space too, so to speak.
They're coming in and muscling into my territory.
Well, I hope you don't feel that way, but
I'm kidding.
No, but obviously Terra House and you, Matt, have done a lot for me in terms of publishing my book, and so like definitely grateful to you and grateful to you for coming on. You're one obviously on our list of like top guests we wanted to get on right away. Yeah, you were right up there, so good to finally have you on.
It's great. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah,
Awesome.
And I guess maybe the best place to start it. So Matt, obviously you're again editor-in-chief of Terra House. I'm guessing almost everyone listening to this knows about Terra House, but nevertheless, do you want to just go ahead, in case anyone isn't familiar, you want to just go ahead and give the rundown of what sort of Terra House is, when you started it, and the mission statement?
No problem. Terra House Press. We formally started publishing books in 2019, but I launched Terra House magazine in 2018. I just describe it as outsider literature because there's a lot of labels going around like alt lit, transgressive lit, etc. And no disrespect to anyone who uses those labels, but I don't know. I'm not looking for a particular aesthetic. Basically, Terra House is a voice for writers who've been ignored by the mainstream. Writers whose works are too honest, too graphic, too out there to get a hearing in mainstream culture, and also for the writers who can't get a hearing among I don't know what they're calling themselves these days, safer lit, woke lit, whatever. As it turns out, anything with alt in the title is destined to be a disaster. Alt lit. So we're not fans of them either. But basically, we're here to kind of, how do I say this without sounding too pretentious? Kind of democratize the whole process of publishing and get, new and exciting voices out there. I kind of had the idea, well, I've always been, I guess, a literarily inclined person. I read a lot when I was in high school. I majored in English at college, and I've been blogging and writing in some form or another publicly since 2009. But my ambition wasn't to be a political pundit or a podcaster or a live streamer or whatever. Like, I wanted to write novels. I wanted to write short stories. In fact, I'm actually writing a poetry collection
Right.
now. That's good. That's slow going, but it will be out eventually. But with Terra House specifically, I kind of got the idea around 2017. If you remember Fluland, which was a
Right.
very popular literary magazine that kind of they were hugely popular because they kind of brought all of these different strands together, kind of like the more apolitical literary types, frog Twitter types, the anons, etc. Like they all went into Fluland, and they published some really great work. A lot of writers we know, like Calvin Westra or James Newlick, also published with Fluland. Fluland, was taken down in late 2017 due to a stalking campaign against the guy who ran it, because he was accused, among other things, of secretly being Andrew Anglin, among other things. It was both really bizarre and kind of disgusting. But I followed Fluland and a few other literary sites, and around Christmas of that year, I got an email from Richard Power. Richard Power is probably best known to Terra House audiences as the author of our flagship title, Letters from a Heartbroken Pervert. He had written some articles for my site years ago, like around 2015, and he was like, "Oh, I've written this kind of memoir novel. I'm kind of tossing around ideas for a title, Confessions of a Despicable Beta or Letters from a Heartbroken Pervert. And I don't want to have any kind of online profile. Would you be willing to publish it? I trust you because, you're a smart guy. You have good taste. You're a writer yourself. You've published your own books, so you would know how to market the book effectively." So he sent me that email and it got me to thinking. It's like, why don't I start a publishing company and I'll make this the flagship title? Because it would be kind of a natural outgrowth of things I want to do and things I'm good at. Like I said, I've always been more interested in the literature side of things. I wanted to. Well, at that time, the whole idea of being like a pundit or an e-celebrity was kind of dying. I mean, that year I had quasi-retired from online writing and stuff, and and had to work a real job for the first time in years, and so there wasn't much a future in that, but there was a future, in terms of accomplishment and art, and financially in terms of publishing, literary publishing, and also I had self-published my own books over the past few years, so I knew the process of how to market. Right. I knew the process of editing, etc. So I wrote back to him and was like, "Hey, yeah, how would you like to be the flagship title of a new publishing company?" And the name Terra House comes from the fact that I lived in Budapest, Hungary at the time. And I was thinking along the lines of the name should probably be something Hungarian. I don't know why, just to pay homage to this vomit-filled city that I live in. And I was walking around, and I was walking past the Terra House, which is a major landmark in downtown Hungary. It was famously used as the headquarters of the fascist Aerocross Party before and during World War II. And then after World War II, it became the headquarters of the AVH, the Hungarian Communist Secret Police. Now it's a museum. But it was like Terra House, House of Terror, Terra House. It's a nice homage to Hungary. It's catchy. It gets in people's minds. Terra House. It just rolls right off the tongue. So that was where the name came from. And since then, we've been publishing daily over at Terra House magazine, and we've been putting out 1 to 2 books a month at Terra House Press. It's been working out. It's been working out far better than even I thought it would.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard Delicious Tacos say this about you and about Terra House, and I obviously agree that, I mean, by all accounts, it seems like it was a kind of brilliant business move to go from, you're talking about the last sort of dying embers of the dissident right, or the alt-right as it was called back then, in like 2017, 2018. That, as you said, the kind of being a pundit thing was going down. It was kind of sort of black-pilled time, so to speak, a bit, but there was still this certain creative energy. And what Terra House does is it kind of channels creative energy from sort of online, as you said, sort of outsider type creatives. So it's like, I think you got into something at a really good time. But from the sound of the story, not that there's anything wrong with being calculated, but it doesn't necessarily sound like you were exactly like calculated, like this is what's got to happen now, I'm gonna like make money. It's more like it was kind of like a happy string of coincidences and happy string of events that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I'm not a very, I mean, I want to sound, I'm not a very profit motivated person. I mean,
Yeah.
Terra House could probably make me a lot more money if I was. My criteria when I sign books and publish works is it good? Is it interesting? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be something I'd be interested in personally, because running Terra House has really expanded my what I like and what I can get into. There's a perspective. This is something I had experience with. I worked for websites such as Return of Kings and Right On and Tacky's Magazine. And, I've also been in an editorial position in various websites in the past. Like, for example, for a while, Return of Kings had a video game offshoot website called Reaction that I was the editor of. So I had a bit of experience in this department. When you're in an editorial position, as opposed to the position of being a reader, you kind of have to broaden your perspective, as it were. Like, say, for example, before I started Terra House, I really didn't read poetry at all. I didn't care for it. I didn't have anything against it. It's just not something that I specifically went and sought out. And now I read, and now I'm running my own poetry, volume, and this comes after close to 4 years now, just reading a lot of poetry intensely, not just the stuff both published on Terra House, but on other websites like Expat and Misery Tourism, etc. It's a combination of hard work, not just on my part, but also the people who've worked with us over the years. If you're familiar with Glon, he's kind of a well-known figure in the literary, I guess, dissident right sphere. He's like at the center of the Venn diagram about that. He was a major asset in the beginning because he was able to solicit contributions from a lot of cool people. We obviously have Matt Lawrence, who's our fantastic art director. He makes all those books look really, really fantastic. And he does the internal layouts as well. We've got great people like Danny, who's our translator and the magazine editor. Calvin Westra was part of the site when we got started. We've got my podcast co-host Brian Proctor, so like a ton and of course the writers themselves, because the writers, we wouldn't be anything without the writers. But I don't view Terra House as an ideological project. Right. I'm not trying to push like a particular viewpoint. I'm just absolutely tired of people who think like that, to be honest. I would just simplify like this. I just want to read good shit. The government, the corporations have taken everything else from me. I just want to be able to read entertaining shit, and I want to be able to help writers who write that entertaining shit get noticed. That's I don't think I'm asking for a whole lot here.
Yeah. Well,
awesome. We've mentioned before that it's almost as though you are ideological, not you personally, but anyone who writes honest fiction, because it can't be published in the traditional publishing industry. So it's almost a political act just to want to write good fiction.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, I've written about this to a certain extent. I mean, writers like Mark Ames use the term beigist to kind of describe the mainstream, the sort of bland, PC, kind of almost quasi-Christian in some ways. You look at writers like, say, James Fry, or anything that kind of gets popular, anything that's popularized by Oprah, something like Jonathan Franzen or whoever. Or a more recent example, have either of you seen the movie Cuck?
No,
I have actually.
I didn't see it. I should, I guess, or not.
It's not super interesting, but that's a recent example of what I was talking about. I reviewed it when it came out. It came out the same day Joker did a couple of years ago, and I reviewed it when it came out, and I just said, this movie is basically like a liberal version of those Calvinist morality tales that hardcore Christians would tell their kids to warn them from the dangers of sin. Like, there's no real difference between something like it and what's that movie, Christian movie, Fireproof, that evangelical one. I mean, sure, Cuck has got like nudity and swear words, but the purpose is the same. It's about propagandizing. It's about warning people about the dangers of sin. The sin in this case is, I guess, being a straight white male. I mean, there are a ton of other problems with that movie, but that's like the underlying thing. There's no humor in it. It's just bathos, ridiculous bathos. And it's funny, but it doesn't intend to be funny. It's funny in like a Tommy Wiseau kind of way funny.
True.
And that's something I just can't stand, whether it comes from the left or the right. When you're obviously people are going to infuse their perspective into their writing. It's not possible to be like some kind of detached drone, but you shouldn't be didactic. That's the word. I hate didacticism. It makes for bad writing. You should be strive to be entertaining. You should be strive to have something to say. You should not be trying to lecture the audience. And that's basically what the mainstream does. That's what beigeism is. It's Flannery O'Connor's Church of Christ about Christ, and that's part of why me and many other people just find it disgusting, and why sites like Terra House are able to thrive in this environment.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's where we talk about Terra House's mission and the mission of New Right of our podcast. I think that's basically the overlap. We're not politically motivated per se, but we're trying to make literature that cuts through, or we're trying to, in our case, trying to promote literature that cuts through and cuts around all of that bullshit. So I see us
literature that's able to be honest,
exactly,
able to speak about things honestly without kowtowing to a political agenda. And it just so happens that it has to be outsider literature today that does that. In my opinion.
Yeah, the notion of honesty, and even like what BAP sometimes calls if you want to call it the dissident writer frog Twitter, but I've heard this term faction of truth get kicked around, which seems a little bit over, like a little cocky, like you're so sure you're on the side of truth. But when it comes to like recognizing basic realities and not, again, as Matt was saying, always being didactic and peddling a certain ideology and a certain like a sort of morality tale, then the notion of a faction of truth, I think, makes more sense, because it's not even so much about a positive set of beliefs. It's about simply not buying into, I guess, the mainstream narrative.
The word I like to use in this situation is verisimilitude, or ethos is another good word. Just the kind of truth that sort of cuts past, the surface. Verisimilitude is just a quality that can't be faked. And this is especially appropriate since, you said you wanted to talk about the Manosphere 2 literature pipeline.
Right.
This was something that was very important back during the Manosphere days, when you had all these guys who were anonymous, but they were writing about their experiences with women, etc.
Right.
You could tell, if you had a good bullshit detector, you could tell who was being honest and who was full of shit, basically. Now, an intelligent person, a con man, a narcissist, can fool someone to a certain extent over a period of time, but it's impossible to keep that up over time. Little details start, cropping up. The mask eventually slips. It's the writers that had that verisimilitude, the quality you can't fake. You have to earn it. You have to have it. You can't pretend to have it online or in the real world. And that's the approach I take that's the approach I've always taken as a reader. That's the approach I've always taken in my capacity as a publisher. One of my favorite writers of all time is Louis Ferdinand Céline. Pretty much all the literature I like that came after Céline was influenced by him in some fashion. Houellebecq, Henry Miller, Charles Bukowski, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac. Céline is someone who would not fit neatly into, if he was still alive today, he would not fit neatly into a left or a right-wing paradigm, and he would be perfectly fine with that. He was a fascist who openly supported the Vichy French regime, but his books were not like some starchy conservative, we should avoid swear words and sex. Now his books got into the darkness of it, just the raw reality of the French working class with the slang and the ellipses and the fantastical elements. Céline's writing was once described as creative confessions, in which he basically took incidences he took his own life experiences, but he made himself look worse. He made himself look more pathetic, more funny. He exaggerated things in the same way that a friend telling you about a story that happened to you might exaggerate, but
Right.
but the truth of it is still there. The core of it is still there. The verisimilitude, even if some of the details are a little fudge. That's the important quality that I think we should be aiming. That's the quality at least I try to aim for as a writer, and that's the quality I look for in other writers.
No, certainly, and I'm not saying that that Dragon Day, the book I published through Terra House, is totally on that level, but that's certainly what I tried to do. Or I think I'm proud of the extent to which I succeeded in that with my book, is sort of taking elements of humiliation or a sense of shame or whatever the case might be that I'd felt in my life, and weave it into a pretty dark narrative. So that's me plugging my book shamelessly, but nevertheless, it is a Terra House title, so I'm also plugging.
Go buy it.
Yes, you should buy my book, but you should buy other books from Terra House as well, which espouse that quality. I only brought it up because it did come to mind. I mean, I think I agree. I haven't read as much Celine as I would like. But I've read a lot of Welbeck, and I basically agree with you, Matt, that sort of quality that you get in Celine, that you get in Welbeck, of sort of leaning into those, exaggerating a bit, but leaning into those elements that I'm trying to think of the best word, the real dirt and shit of life, leaning into that and writing about that and finding the truth in that in a way that writers in the Manosphere did when they're writing about getting laid or not getting laid, in the way that Delicious Tacos writes about, when he's writing about sex, but also about, various hypochondria and other sort of issues he's faced.
Explosive cysts in his ass.
Exactly. It's about leaning it rather than the didactic morality tales that one gets in the mainstream. Or increasingly, that is what mainstream movies and books are. It's about, it seems like it's like the least conservative thing ever, but like there are people with certain conservative and right-wing values for whom I think that access to truth that comes from writing about these kind of dirty topics. Again, you're talking about Bukowski, Memoirs of a Dirty Man, or whatever his book is called. That's kind of like the beating pulse of like what good literature, especially in this specific moment in like cultural history, is.
Yeah, Houellebecq's probably the best modern example of that. Houellebecq's been interviewed about this, and he's written about some pretty politically charged stuff. He wrote Submission, which was hypothesizing about the Islamic takeover of France. I have not read that yet, unfortunately. I hear it's good.
It's good.
I'm a fan of his earlier work. Whatever, Atomized, Platform. And Houellebecq once said in an interview that the main reason he's not a reactionary is just that he feels that there's no way to kind of turn back what's happened in society.
Yeah.
He writes about how the capitalism, or late stage capitalism, or neoliberalism, or whatever you want to call it, has been extended to relationships between men and women, which has created entire tranches of winners and losers, and also has resulted in some pretty dysfunctional behavior. Like Platform is essentially about sex tourism in Southeast Asia, or whatever. You've got the main character who's been incel for years, and his hobby is writing all these weird philosophical stories with starring about animals, and then he gets teamed up at work with like this hideously ugly virgin, and like, oh yeah, we're gonna go kill these guys on the beach, but the virgin wimps out and then he gets hit by a car. It's not something. It's something that both your average left-wing PC beigist and your average right-wing conservative would find really offensive. But that's in part because it strikes to like the fundamental heart of what's going on in society.
Right. No, I remember we did our first show titled The Manosphere to Literature Pipeline. And there's talk that we may call this conversation The Manosphere to Literature Pipeline Part 2, depending on how it goes. It definitely is operative in the conversation we're having, I think. But in our first episode, I reflecting on the writings of Hartiste, and how kind of what you said earlier, like when people write about sex and write about getting laid and attraction, like that is a good sort of litmus test for how honest and how brutally honest you can be. And I view that and the quote unquote male gaze and your sort of the access that your libido gives you as a sort of access you have to a sort of radical honesty and a way of looking. And I think that can extend out to not just writing about sex or women, but you can kind of start to view the world in that way. And I think that gives you an access to a certain truth, and also it gives you a certain access to the filth of the world, shall we speak, or so to speak, which is something, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but there's that. You've read Bronze Age Mindset, of course, and there's that in the last chapter. BAP advocates that people sort of look into the dark corners of the world. Like, we need to be acquainted with the underground and with the filth of things, I believe is how he puts it. Have you ever made that connection between that, that section in Bronze Age Mindset and the sort of literary matters we're talking about?
Not explicitly, but I think that's something I just kind of instinctively know. Just right. That you're the first person to really articulate it, but it's the truth. It's the problem with a lot of writers, the problem with a lot of people in general today is that we live in a very sanitized era. We have a very it doesn't make any sense to describe it like this, but we simultaneously live in the most prudish and most degenerate era possible.
Right. Yeah.
In the sense that you've got critical race theory, you've got drag queens reading stories to kids, you've got ethical slutdom, you've got every other woman's got an OnlyFans account. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything's governed by rules. People get prissy and uptight over certain types of words. Don't misgender me, this or that. You can't. Even with all this, this filth going on the internet, the internet is far more censored than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Like something like Goatsy would be completely inconceivable today. You've got so many anons on Twitter, who just get regularly banned for no reason. So it's my friend Beckloff kind of described it. It's like corporations are trying to move us towards demolition man, basically a world in which there's no physicality. There's no risk to anything. It's like, sex only occurs through VR headsets. Everyone eats Taco Bell. And if you swear, you immediately get fined for disturbing the peace. That's the kind of world we're heading towards, but it's not, this was something that was, it was claimed from like the 80s and 90s that like Christian conservatives would lead us to that kind of world. And that world has happened, but it's not being led by like evangelicals. It's being led by progressives. It's being led by people who consider themselves to be on the right side of history. It's like nobody cares about Christian conservatives anymore. They're a completely ignored force, but you can get in absolute trouble for not mouthing the PC orthodoxies, which change on a day-to-day basis. It's a never-ending holiness spiral, but there's no guts, there's no reality to it. There's no life, there's no vitality. Mm-hmm. That's something that Bronze Age pervert has kind of railed against. And to kind of go back to Artiste, or Royce as he used to be known in the good old days, his writing and the writing of a lot of the Manosphere greats had that vitality. It was not, and it wasn't even necessarily guys like the whole Manosphere thing. Yeah, it got associated with the pickup culture, and yeah, there was a lot of talk about picking up women, how to pick up women, etc. But a lot of it was just guys trying to figure out how the world worked. Guys who we use the blue pill, red pill metaphors, and frankly, I'm kind of annoyed and sick of all the pill metaphors.
Right.
But there was a truth to it. It's just guys who were average guys coming together. It was like, okay, how does this work? We were lied to about this. This is how things really go. You start out with you start on that process with women. We all got told by our boomer parents that just be nice to a girl, etc., which is the dating equivalent of being told that get a job by just walk in and hand in your resume or some nonsense like that. And it had no applicability to our lives at all. It's like being nice to a girl and just showing up would not have gotten you laid. It won't get you laid today. It certainly wouldn't have gotten you laid back in 2006. So you figure out what's going on there, and then you start thinking about other things, which I won't get into on this show. Right now.
No,
what
certainly.
What do you think about the Manosphere and that type of writing? What do you think it is about that translates so well to writing in general? And, obviously tacos emerged from the Manosphere. What current do you think he was tapping into?
Well, I had an English teacher back in high school who described it like this. It's like all literature, all writing, all art comes down to one of two themes: sex and death. Human beings are obsessed with sex. You and Gus heat up with marriage, having kids, whatever. But it all comes down to sex if you just reduce it down to its core components. And then there's death, mortality, the fear of dying, the fear of the afterlife. If you're a Christian, the fear of punishment in hell. If you want to go back to Augustine's Confessions or something like that. And the Manosphere was, it was sex. That was the angle that the Manosphere was going into. That was the angle that someone like Artiste was going into. Writing about, this requires a bit more elaboration, just because Artiste, his writing arc career went through several stages. 2007, 2008, when he was going by the name Royce in DC, and he mainly just kind of wrote about. He wrote about his experiences meeting women. He did give advice, and it was, and it was actionable advice. But I lured into it because, and this is another funny wraparound to the Manosphere literature pipeline. There was a pretty popular blog in the 2000s called Two Blowhards. It's run by these kind of older right-wing guys in the New York art sphere who. Maybe not super right wing, but they were all like, yeah, we like hearing dissenting opinions. The stuff is interesting. We're just looking for cool stuff. So their blog was kind of like a hub for all of this. And I discovered Artiste when they linked to one of his blog posts one day. So like, because you got these old guys who are writing about what's going on at MoMA or whatever, and then they also would link to Royce. He was like, yeah, this guy is he's interesting. It's funny. I actually became friends with a lot of the guys who ran that blog. It's retired now. I think they stopped in 2010, and I was hooked from Royce just on the basis of he was just an insanely good writer back then. Like his writing was just just brimming with vitality, humor, etc. It's like, and I was impressed by his output as well. Like there's a period where he was like writing at least like every day, like 7 days a week. It's like he had an incredible drive to just get the stuff out there. The stuff about picking up women or learning how to, deal with women easier, that was very secondary for me. There's a lot of, because around this time you had, the so-called seduction community, the weebs like Mystery or Neil Strauss, that basically tried to reduce relationships down to mathematical equations. Royce was interesting because he actually seemed like a human being. Like he was a human being. He wasn't some fruitcake going around to rock clubs with eyeliner and a pierced soul patch and a fruity pimp hat. He seemed like someone who maybe you wouldn't necessarily want to be his friend, but he was like an interesting figure.
Yeah.
Like Welbeck is not. You probably wouldn't want to hang out with Welbeck. He's probably not a fun person to be around, but he's an interesting person and he's a smart guy and he's a good writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But yeah, there was him. There were a ton of other figures back then who were kind of most of them are gone now. I mean, the other major figure around that time was Rouge, who's he's still around, though he's now a devout Orthodox Christian. But he was another he's a personal friend of mine. He's someone who I've known for about a decade now, and his writing was. His writing also went into the same, territory as Royce in terms of like the vitality and stuff. but he was a bit more analytical and a bit more dry. This is a lot of his older posts are worth reading if you can find them. He's deleted a lot of his old stuff because after he became a devout Christian. But that was actually something I criticized him for with regards to the didacticism. And I said this to him publicly. I'm not talking behind his back. But he wrote several memoirs about his life. Most of them I think are still available. A Dead Bat in Paraguay. I read that. That came out in 2009. That was a really good book. That was him talking about kind of how he got started as an international traveler. You know, he got sick of he got sick of his life in DC working as a microbiologist. So he saved up his money and decided he was going to go on a backpacking trip across South America with the intent to get laid as much as possible. And he's pretty frank about the fact that that part of it was just an utter disaster. You know, he goes through it, and I don't think he gets laid. He starts in Ecuador, and I don't think he gets laid until he gets to Argentina. But he also talks about other things like, you know, how like the food and, you know, the food poisoning just completely wrecked his health. You know, he there's a lot of loving descriptions of him, you know, of all the diarrhea he had. It's just it's delicious tacos-esque at points, but it's very funny and affecting. He also goes into things like his relationship with his family, you know, etc. That's a good book. But a few years later, he wrote another memoir called Pussy Paradise, which was about his experience living in Romania. He kind of achieved a level of like local notoriety. He was featured on local TV. You know, he was dating all these girls, and it's not a bad book. But the thing I criticized him for was that he would keep pulling the reader aside whenever the action was getting good, and be like, and he'd go on like some moral lesson, like some kind of depressing moral about like, yeah, I mean, I'm just doing this because you know, I don't feel anything inside. I'm addicted to sex. I'm paraphrasing here. It's been ages since I read the book. But basically, instead of letting like his experiences get the point across, he would like tell his experiences. And that's a cardinal sin in writing or any kind of art. You're supposed to show, not tell. In fact, there's one really, the best part of that book is near the end. He's like hooking up with this girl, and like he's invented like this sex potion out of some bullshit he had in his fridge. And it's out. He thinks it's bullshit. The girl thinks it's bullshit, but she goes along anyway because she wants to be seduced. She wants the illusion. You know, she doesn't want reality. She wants magic, as Tennessee Williams might put it. That was a really good part of that book. And if the rest of the book had been like that, it would have been a lot better. But like Rouge was a big influence back then. You know, there were, you know, obviously I was around writing under a pseudonym. You had guys like Matt Lawrence as well, and there's a bunch of others who are no longer around.
No, it's interesting. I just to sort of complete the thought about the Manosphere to literature pipeline idea. I mean, it's not as if you necessarily went into invented Terra House with the idea of this being like a feather in the cap of the former Manosphere, but it really feels like the trajectory of your career as a writer, Matt, has kind of ended up that way. Same with Delicious Tacos, you know, and even this, maybe not so much the same with Royce because the literary element of his writing was always there, but in the way that he's remembered. Like Dan and I read, I read his entire book, the book that he has, that Royce has on Amazon. I don't know if it's him personally, or I hope it's not someone. Go on.
It's not him.
So I probably helped someone.
Well, we gave someone else some money,
which is unfortunate. But I did enjoy reading it, and it wasn't to learn seduction techniques. It was because I read it as literature, basically.
I mean, a lot of that advice really isn't relevant anymore. I mean, the whole seduction community was sort of wedded to the Manosphere in a sense, but not really. But that whole culture of like, neg this HB5 to get her in bed, and here's the 3 stages of seduction, and here's like the 10 sub stages. That was a lot of guys deluded themselves into because they read evolutionary psychology and they thought that was how things always were. We're just going back to our caveman roots. This is women do like dominant men, but a lot of the stuff they talked about was not the product of some immutable human nature. It was the product of the culture of the 90s and like the 2000s. That was a period in which it was no longer the free love era. You guys could no longer get laid by walking out the door. No one was doing it in the road anymore. But at the same time, we were all kind of unmoored from traditional dating mores, as it were. It was more difficult in terms of like the sex ratio. Because that was another factor that was also discussed on these blogs back in the day. Like right now in the U.S., particularly among like the under 40 cohort, there are slightly more men than there are women. That was not the case in the 60s. There was noticeably more women than there were men, which obviously leads to a situation where men are competing more and more to because they have to in order to get laid. But the culture of the 90s and the 2000s was one where people went to bars. They were still sociable. They were still willing to meet strangers. They were still willing to. They still had normal social graces, and that all started dying out when the iPhone came out. I mean, I didn't. I'm not the only person saying this, and a lot of it is just kind of common knowledge now. But there was actually a study not too long ago that showed the rates of virginity among men and women over like the past few years. For women, it's the rate of like virginity has remained flat, but for men, it took a huge increase in 2008 when the iPhone came out. And what happened there is just that people became a lot more antisocial. This is a dynamic I described. This is something that guys have increasingly noticed in the late 2000s. Before the iPhone, you make plans with your friends. Like you say, oh, we're going to meet at 7 p.m. at X bar, and if you can't make it, whatever, but like we're going to be there. And that's it. It's like you have to make plans in advance, and, people were a lot more open then because you were going to the bar or wherever to socialize. But what happened after the iPhone is like you'd have people go to the bar. They'd like text all their friends excitedly, like, yeah, come over here. Then like 10 people would show up and they just talk to each other, or they'd just be playing on their phones and they wouldn't want to talk to anybody else. And this just compounded until that whole culture just kind of fell away because it's completely. How do Zoomers have sex?
I mean,
the short. I was about to make that joke, but yeah, basically Tinder, OnlyFans, like the whole seduction community culture, PUA culture is just completely dead now. Which is funny because people always accuse me of claiming to be a PUA, which I've never claimed to be. I mean, I'm just a guy who wrote about stuff that I found interesting. Gotcha. But that's life.
Yeah. So you would, well, first of all, I think that's a worthwhile tangent because Dan and I on our literature to Manosphere Pipeline episode, we were going to talk about. We touched right, didn't we, Dan? Like we touched a little bit on the way that technology and dating apps have sort of made a lot of, even someone as frankly brilliant as Hartiste, even his advice is now a little dated because the culture has changed so much. But what you talked about there, Matt, is pretty relevant. Not even just the dating apps, but even just the iPhone and the total sucking of any sense of serendipity out of life. You know what I mean? How can you be a seducer within that?
Yeah.
But so that's a worthwhile tangent. But also another thing to kind of unpack from what you said, that you would differentiate the Manosphere proper from the sort of PUA community. I mean, as would I, but you know more about it than me. You would say the Manosphere was was sort of tangentially related to that, but was something more specific than that.
Yeah, there was overlap, obviously, but like the Manosphere was more, like I said, it was just guys trying to figure out how the world worked, which encompassed a lot more than women. That was just the starting point for a lot of people. But that's where you start getting into understanding things like, like the role of the Federal Reserve, or the nature, or reading Smedley Butler's War as a Racket or something like that. It was a bit more. I don't know if I would necessarily describe it as political because pretty much all the guys I knew back then didn't vote, but it was about kind of trying to understand the greater dynamics of why society was the way it was, right, and how to best navigate it. Whereas the seduction community was very narrowly focused. Oh, you can't get chicks. Here's how you get chicks. End of story. And a lot of those guys just, to use a more esoteric phrase, they just completely lacked a theory of mind. If you've read I have shamefully read both the Mystery Method and the game. The Mystery Method is the Mystery Method was dated as soon as it came out. It's all this breathless. Yeah, you can have beautiful women too. You can have supermodels. Just this very vague and just very vague advice written in the tone of like a super excited nerd who's just been handed a bunch of oregano, but he's been told it's weed, and now he's acting like he's high. Something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the game by Neil Strauss is a bit more interesting. It's a memoir of his time in the seduction community, but he basically kind of his motivation was the same as most guys. Like he couldn't figure out how to get laid. You know, he was coming off of a bad relationship, and he gets involved with these guys, and he kind of just goes through the sheer amounts of social dysfunction, these guys exhibited. You know, he moved in with a bunch of his PUA buddies in a mansion in Los Angeles, and they called it Project Hollywood, and they're all having these weird drama fallouts, and you know, dudes are threatening to kill themselves, and it's like it's not a favorable portrayal of these people at all. It's like you read the game, and your conclusion is like, I don't want to be like these people at all. They're fucked up. And Strauss is not someone I would consider a 100% reliable narrator, because he's always got to. He himself has got a bit of that didacticism going on. It's just this kind of squeaky attempt to remove himself. He's trying to plunge himself into like the currents of like a weird subculture, but at the same time he's trying to wash his hands of it. You know, he's like, oh yeah, I was involved with these guys, but I'm not like them. I'm better than them.
He's a journalist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a journalist. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, and the novel ends with the story ends with a fairy tale ending where he marries one of Courtney Love's backup singers, who divorced him 2 years later. That part didn't make it into the book. But he took that approach with multiple subcultures. I also read his book Emergency, which came out in 2009, I believe. And again, it's the same deal. Like he suddenly wakes up and he's having panic attacks about the end of civilization, and then he becomes obsessed with survivalism and prepping and getting multiple citizenships and buying gold. But at the end, he kind of realizes, the world isn't going to end, and he just washes his hands of all these weirdos who he was pretending to befriend over the course of 6 months. But to kind of circle back, the Manosphere was obviously influenced by that, but the Manosphere was more normal dudes. You know, I gave Rouge as a sort of an example of someone who was also very big in the Manosphere at that time. Rouge was more of a I guess Rouge would go at that time was more towards the PUA end of the spectrum, but he never called himself a PUA. He's just like, I'm a player. Like that was in part his appeal to a lot of people, is that he went into like more analytical detail. Like he wrote Bang, which was his Bible on picking up women, and he went through every detail right down to how you should behave when you're getting the girl's clothes off in bed, which is, it seems weird, but it's more useful on a level than the Mystery Method. And he's not a weirdo. Like he's a normal dude. Like he just, uses normal terminology. And his motivation was just that, like, yeah, I was having trouble getting laid, and I just went and drilled the books and figured it out. But eventually a lot of what residual PUA influence was in the Manosphere kind of filtered out over time, just because of the social changes that you and I both mentioned, Matt, but also just because people just kind of got bored of it. It's like, I've talked about this with Matt Lawrence and others. It's like, once you've gotten to a certain level with women in terms of like a certain level of sexual experiences, you just kind of stop caring. It's like Rouge, he wrote Game, which was like his final book on like meeting women. That was back in 2018. And he said in the beginning that, like, yeah, I've slept with tons of women over the course of my life, but I couldn't even remember the faces of more than like 6 of them, because it's just like, it's just sex. It's boring. A girl's not going to stick out in your mind unless you actually loved her or she was completely insane, or both. So a lot of it was just the dying interest in seduction, as it were. The dying interest came, the interest died off just because people just got bored of it. It's like they moved on. It's like, okay, yeah, we figured out women. You know, I'm getting laid as much as I want to, or a lot of these guys actually got married and have kids now. And it's like, okay, what else can I do with my time? Oh, let's go read up on the money power. Oh, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go look at some ancient anthropology books, stuff like that. You know, it's like people have real interests beyond just trying to optimize their negs so that they can increase the percentage of going home with some slut 0.1%.
Right, but there even within the higher IQ, so to speak, and the more sort of there are sociological insights to some of that stuff, and I guess that for some people maybe it kind of grew out of that initial sexual motivation for, you know, learning how the world works, learning how women really are. That can grow, and that's what we talked about, the whole idea of the pipeline. That can grow into different realms of interest, whether it's very political or whether it is reading Celine and starting a small publishing house.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Delicious Tacos, he doesn't talk about this explicitly, but it's a pretty obvious theme if you've read The Pussy. Like, he starts out, just a lot of the stories of him hooking up with girls are at the beginning of the book. I know, and it's just like all this crazy stuff, that he goes into. One of my favorite stories is the one where he's talking about, he's hypothetically talking to his neighbors, like, yeah, I wanted to jerk off to your tits, but you wouldn't leave your house, so I had no choice but to go down to the bad part of LA and buy some heroin off of a crack dealer and then smoke the heroin. And he just narrates this deadpan like it's completely normal. Yeah, I can't masturbate. I'm going to go shoot some smack. But over the course of the book, like, the tales of him hooking up with women just kind of drop off. And even near the end, like, there's the one where he's like, there's the section of the book where he's like, yeah, if you want to get good with women, just, music, money, or murder. Those are the only things they understand. Women think I'm human trash because I pay taxes and vote.
Right. Yeah, I remember that insight of his. And by the way, we're trying to get Tacos on the show. So Tacos, if you're listening, come on. But I remember that insight. It might have been a tweet. It might have been in a book. It might have been both, where he talks about how we're just like, and this is maybe a good example of something where it's downstream from what would be a sort of PUA insight, but it's also like this profound Welbeckian insight into the way that women are / the way that society works. And I just remember it was they want the extremes. Either you got to be like on the street like some insane heroin using guy, like that can be attractive to women, or you got to be like really, really filthy rich, but like just tax paying middle class guy with a 9 to 5, 9 to 6, 9 to 7 these days. Forget about it.
Or it's like, Bronze Age perverts quip. Like, in 10 years, women aren't going to be able to get off unless they're being trampled by horses.
Yeah. No, there are insights to that go beyond, how do I seduce women? There are insights for seduction within insights like that, but it goes beyond. It taps into something, kind of dark about, the way that women are, but also the way that society works. And I think that's where the pipeline element comes in. You can follow these trails of thought down sort of rabbit holes and develop a much more truthful and honest way of looking at the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly now, given everything that's happened in the past couple of years. I mean, God knows. God knows how people are going to interact normally, how there's going to be any kind of normative relationship between men and women now. When you have a good section of the population terrified to leave the house without a piece of cloth strapped to their face, or, rolling lockdowns or whatnot, everything being pushed online, remote work, looking at it from my own perspective, I've kind of had it with women, to be honest. That was another current in the manosphere. If you hold the men going their own way, or has it eventually degraded into MGTOW, a lot of guys who just kind of swore off women. There were a lot of flame wars about that back in the old days. It's like, oh, you MGTOWs are pussies. You're just virgins. You can't get laid. But then after 20 some odd women later, or really couple of really bad relationships later, suddenly it clicks in your mind, yeah, women are more trouble than it's fucking worth. Particularly, particularly if you're doing something really stupid, like say you're a mid-tier e-celeb and you start meeting women who are fans of yours. That doesn't end well. But that doesn't end well for pretty much anyone. Which you can throw a dart at a wall and hit a guy who's had in this corner of the internet literary who's had some issue with women in the past 5 years.
I think tacos, or someone mentioned that the secret today is fame plus game, but what you just said would kind of serve to belie that, I think.
I think Rouge came out with that. He was like, yeah, in the future you're going to need fame plus game plus money, which is again kind of evident if you see like the skyrocketing standards of women. Is like, yeah, six figures, 6 feet 6 inches, which, to be perfectly honest, you can't really blame them entirely for that.
Right.
Rouge wrote in the beginning of Game, and he actually once explained this to me in person. It's like, the reason women kind of behave the way they do is because they have so much choice, and he said, like, if it was reversed and men had as much power as women do in the current dating market, every guy would be Adolf Hitler. Like day one, I mean, it would be awesome. Day one, imagine like you have all these women throwing themselves at you, beautiful, ugly, old, young, etc. Just imagine like either of you guys, you post something on Twitter or Instagram, and you've got like 10 women within like 20 minutes or even sooner than that, being like, "Oh, you're so handsome, you're so beautiful, or you're so cool. I want to meet you, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to sound like I'll sound like a feminist when I say that, but like, women who aren't interested in you for you, they're just attracted to you physically or whatever, or your bankroll, or just they think you're witty or some shit, or they think you're funny. Eventually, you start rejecting them based on absolutely ridiculous and arbitrary criteria. It's like the whole meme ages ago of like, her kneecaps are too sharp, 2 out of 10. Guys would become like that. Yeah. They would. If you've got like supermodel quality women throwing themselves at you day after day, yeah, you're going to start to reject them. Because, oh, you've got a mole on your neck. No, you're a little too tall. You're like a ½ inch too tall. Oh no, I don't like your fake nails. Oh no, I don't like your platinum blonde hair. No, oh, I see you have got a little gray hair, even though you're only 25. No, you're out. Women are, to a certain extent, just responding to the reality that they live in.
Exactly.
It's not something you can really. It's not something that's good, but it's not something you can really get angry at them over.
Right. I mean, I think obviously the Manosphere and certainly the PUA types it's almost synonymous in the popular imagination with misogyny. And is there some misogyny that emanates from those corners of the internet? Absolutely. Some of it's in humor, but I think a lot of it is just that they're calling it like they see it. They're being honest about the way that women are. And all that they're doing is not pedestalizing them. I mean, it's basically the PC take is that men are bastards who have like ruined the world and continue to ruin the world and have, they've been in power and they've started all these wars, and women are like the fairer sex, basically. Like that's basically the politically correct position. And I think all that the Manosphere says is, no, actually, there's a certain, obviously the men and women play different roles historically and in society, but the women have their own...
women have their own base desires. They have their own demons.
Exactly.
They're not perfect angels. I mean, that whole corruption of the idea of the fairer sex, that comes from Shakespeare, and it had nothing to do with attitude. The reason in Shakespeare's time women were called the fairer sex because women generally have lighter skin than men, but are lighter colored skin because their skin is thinner, which is obvious if you look, that holds across like races. Like, black women typically have lighter skin than black men. It's not a personality thing. It's not like a racial thing. It's just a reality of biology. And somewhere along the line that got corrupted into That's a whole like Victorian thing
Mm-hmm.
about how women are like, pure and innocent angels. That was a big motivation for women's suffrage. Actually, the idea that if we got women voting, then government and society would become more moral. Because this is not often discussed, but like first wave feminism was intimately tied up with prohibition. The
Right.
idea that women were just they wanted to ban alcohol. The women's temperance union wanted to ban alcohol because all these men were loutish. And they were just getting drunk and they weren't taking care of their families, which was there was some of that obviously, but a lot of it was a lot of these kind of Puritan type women who are just the same people who have running society now, basically. The same people who just want to sanitize everything. They were doing with alcohol 100 years ago, and they're doing it with sex now, and everything else, and language. People who just women who just are stick in the mud, don't want to have any fun. Look at someone like the famous temperance crusader Carrie Fisher, who went around smashing up bars with a hatchet. Just Google a picture of her, and you can see how much fun she was. Almost certainly, she was no fun to be around. You can just tell.
No, yeah. No, these forces are still very active, certainly. But yeah, like that key manosphere insight is just understanding that yes, women are as men, understanding and accepting that women are as base as them. I mean, that's kind of the key insight.
There's a whole lot of double thinking propaganda going around. Like they go like that. A lot of like the feminist and social justice agita against the manosphere kind of ramped up in like the mid 2010s, which was by the point by which the manosphere had pretty much died. But they'd go and say stuff like, "Oh, this is rapey," etc. All these feminists will complain about, "Oh, this is rapey, rape this, rape that," and then some lady will publish an article in BuzzFeed or whatever. I seduced my rapist, stuff like that. That's It's like, yeah, I'm not taking cues from you on anything.
For sure. Well, Dan, I remember you had some questions about like you were gonna ask Matt about like the lay of the land for lit.
Yeah. So how do you see the future of outsider lit kind of unfolding? We obviously have Terra House here producing, publishing a lot of great novels and short stories and what have you. And recently, I'm sure you saw that Zero HP sold a ton of money worth of NFTs of his novel. And so I'm curious, what do you think the future has in store for Outsider Lit?
Well, it's gonna be basically unstoppable force meets a movable object in the form of we've got all these. I don't want to say things are good now with all the censorship going on and the fact that cancel culture exists and people are hypersensitive. But in terms of like artistic achievements and artistic accomplishment, right now what's going on now is better at any point than I've seen during my adult lifetime. In terms of all the great writers and artists and musicians coming out there, you've got like on the music front, you've got people like Negative XP and Eggy, etc. You've got the number of great writers affiliated with Terra House and other sites such as Expat and Misery is just too many to list. You've got new groups like the Independent Fiction Alliance coming up, just kind of publishers and writers banding together to kind of promote each other and fight censorship. The issue I see going forward is there's always going to be cancel culture. Obviously, there's always going to be ninnies who are not happy that someone is writing a short story that has tits in it. And there's always going to be corporate censorship with regards to Amazon controlling what can be published on their platform, etc. But I've seen a lot of great things. Like Expat's been doing some great stuff with their poetry readings. They've gotten heavy hitters like Curtis Yarvin and Paul Town to show up. Stuff like that. I think I think in the near future we really have the chance to kind of start guiding the culture in a way that wasn't possible 10 years ago, just because we've kind of advanced into a period in society where nobody believes what's going on in the mass media, nobody believes what the government's saying, and people are just hungry for an alternative. And people are, I don't want to say people are more literate than they were 10 years ago. That seems kind of a weird claim to make, but people are more interested in what say Terra House is doing, or what a publisher like Expat is doing, than they were 10 years ago. There's more of a space for these neglected writers, neglected artists to get an audience. This is the time is kind of right for this. I mean, to kind of circle back to the Manosphere thing, the Manosphere was in many ways a victim of its own success. A lot of like the ideas and concepts that were bandied about by Artiste or Rouge or myself have just kind of become cultural white noise. I wrote about this in the foreword I wrote to Matt Lawrence's book. You've got like a knowledge of what's going. Guys are not clueless in the way they were 10 years ago about the nature of women. Like there's obviously a lot of simping going on. There's a lot of social justice stuff, but the average guy's a lot more aware. And even people who don't like this stuff are more aware of it. I mean, you've got Rick and Morty making jokes about negging and stuff. The cultural consciousness is there. The space has kind of opened up for kind of freed people who are not interested in or not able to conform to the PC center to really express themselves, and the means are there for them to get an audience in a way that didn't exist 10 years ago. We've seen the bottom fall out of internet marketing, but for real writers who actually have things to say, like, this is a pretty good time to be alive.
No, it's definitely a hopeful way of looking at it, for sure.
Yeah, it almost seems like as the mainstream publishing and entertainment industry becomes more and more homogenous and politically on message, as it were, that it creates, more and more space for people who want to actually write good fiction and produce good entertainment to operate.
For sure.
Well, a lot of it is just that the mainstream is just very, very stupid when it goes about these things. This is something I've written about a lot, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's noticed this. A lot of woke literature, woke art, woke entertainment relies on really grimy old cliches about minorities, women, gays, etc. You can give it a major example. This would be like the first movie in the new Star Wars trilogy, The Force Awakens. You've got a prominent black character as the main character, but his only character trait is cowardice. That's literally how black men were depicted in like the 1930s. Like, ooh, scaredy cat black guy who's afraid of the dark, etc. The writers of that, I guess, thought they were being clever. They didn't realize that's one of the oldest racist tropes out there. Then they went and repeated it in feminist Ghostbusters years later. Again, you've got a black character, a black woman whose only character trait is that she's afraid of everything. You can extend this to say, video games as well. I don't know if either of you are gamers, but I was a big fan of like the Mass Effect series in the late aughts, early 2010s. The third game in this trilogy is roundly mocked because that was when they started putting in a whole bunch of social justice stuff. Like there's suddenly a gay character, there's like a Hispanic character and all this stuff. But the issue isn't that the character's gay. The issue isn't that the character is Hispanic. The issue is that they rely on really shop-worn cliches. Like the Hispanic character in Mass Effect 3 is just this. He's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. because that's who I think of when I think Latino. I think Freddie Prinze Jr. And his dialogue is just him, being a meathead. He has no personality. All he does is sprinkle random Spanish words into conversos because that's how Latinos act, right? That's how Latinos act. They just won't shut up about their abuelas, huevos rancheros, etc. No, that's not how Latinos act. That's how a white liberal from a 99% white zip code thinks Latinos act.
Same
like
thing with the gay. Ramon.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, part of what's driving people away from this. It's not like the woke people like, oh, you're just not happy that they're making stories about people of color and sexual minorities. No, we're fine with that. I mean, I publish like I said, Terra House is not an ideological project. I publish minority writers. I publish gay writers. I've published a few trans writers. I publish people who write good shit and it's entertaining. But what I don't like is this cardboard cutout is what passes for sensitivity and openness and woke culture is just boring cliches that even a boring cliches that even a lot of like authentic racists would resort to because they're just that insulting.
Yeah, no, for sure. Off topic slightly, but going back to what we were just saying earlier, and I know that you're probably not the right person to ask about this. We would like to get Manuel Marrero, if I'm saying that right, on New Right. But do you know what the story with the like Expat, obviously up there with Terra House, is like, I think one of the most exciting, small publishers kind of covering some outsider lit and some with legitimately dissident views. They had Yarvin come to one of their events recently. I know you're not the right person to ask this, but I'm curious, like, do you know what the story is with Expat? Are they older than Terra House? They're maybe a little bit less associated with Frog Twitter, but like associated enough. Like, what's your experience working with them? Yeah.
I can't really speak for Manny, but he'd be a great person to have on your show.
Yeah.
But I think they've been around before us, but they kind of launched into prominence around the same time we did because they were not working the exact same angle, but there was a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap. A lot of expat, a lot of writers have. There's a lot of overlap between the writers we've published and the writers they've published. We publish a lot of the same people. Like, they. One prominent example is Eris, Elizabeth Victoria Aldrich.
Right.
She published Ruthless Little Things with Expat. It's a great book, by the way. And she's also written a ton for Terra House.
We mean to get her too, and I got to read Ruthless Little Things. I mean, there's all these people, but definitely getting Manny on. Like, we should try.
But yeah, like, I'm not really the person to ask about that. He's they kind of shot up into prominence around the same time we did, and I love what they're doing. Manny's got his own aesthetic. He's got his own people, and they just do great stuff. Plus there's a more direct connection in that Calvin Westra, one of our founding editors, is now an editor at Expat, so that's awesome. Yeah. Eventually there's just going to be like this gigantic. Like the Viewers universe, Kevin Smith. There's just going to be like this giant shared universe of Terra House, Expat, and jokes.
For sure. Were you going to say something, Dan? Sorry.
No.
Okay, cool. So I thought you... But no, we definitely want to get Manny on at some point. Because, I didn't mean to ask you about what Expat's like mission is. I knew about Terra House first, and I was like, oh, there's actually this other publisher who crosses over a lot. And I don't know, it's maybe it's just worth touching on again briefly. It's kind of an interesting scene. Like, there's that dissident right crossover, but like there's a lot more to it too. James Nulek being a great example. And he did a blurb for Dragon Day. Like, someone who's not remotely right wing, but he's just 9 Banded Books is another. I'm sure I don't need to tell you, Matt, about 9 Banded Books. They're a little bit of an older example of a publisher. Fluland, as you said. Feral House, who I'm actually interested if you've been keeping up with how kind of cucked and woke Feral House has gotten. But
Actually, no, I haven't. I mean, I hadn't followed them for a long time, and then I sort of looked into them again when Adam Parfrey died. But,
right.
What exactly happened with them?
Well, I don't want to start any beef on this podcast with Feral House, but they basically. How to even approach it? Basically, they put out a statement how they're trying to. They kicked off my friend David Cole's book, which that's a whole other story. But they put a statement out like that they're trying to. Basically, they took the old. So first of all, I'm stumbling over my words here. But all respect to Adam Parfrey, who's legendary publisher. For people who may not know him that are listening to this, he was kind of part of that. He published the book Apocalypse Culture, sort of associated with like Jim Goad and Answer Me and Boyd Rice, like that sort of 90s you talk about like transgressive lit, like that was it at the time, where it sort of might have explored dissident right ideas, but it was kind of in this artsy thing. So Adam Parfrey, I'm not doing justice with my description here. Anyone who's not familiar with his work should definitely look him up. But he's the founder of this publisher called Feral House. Obviously, you know all this, Matt. I'm just explaining for possible listeners. But basically, traditionally, Feral House has this mission of sort of like Terra House, Feral House, Terra House, publishing the unpublishable, exploring ideas that the mainstream won't explore. Like that's classic Feral House. With them, it was mostly nonfiction, but if the shoe fits, it was exploring dissident ideas, outsider artists, etc. And basically, they published, a friend of mine, dissident tacky mag writer David Cole. They kind of got into some beef with him. So they kicked his book off. But I'm not even responding directly to that. It's more that they have twisted the old Feral House mission statement of publishing the unpublishable, publishing like outsider ideas, and they've made it just your basic bitch woke mission, where they're looking for people of color to publish, LGBTQ plus. They've basically made that part of their mission statement, is that they're looking to, basically they have the same mission statement that like Warner Brothers now has, which is that we're looking to enhance, voices traditionally oppressed in the West, which you can see it's like a clever, but actually not at all clever, flipping and twisting of the old very good Feral House mission. So that was a tangent, but that's where Feral House is.
I mean, that's a bit disappointing, but I'm not too surprised. I mean, one publisher I haven't mentioned, but probably should have, that was also an influence on me starting Terra House, was Tyrant Books.
Sure.
Giancarlo Di Trapano. He was a major influence on mid 2010s publishing culture. He put out so many great books, like Marie Calloway's What Purpose Did I Serve in Your Life, Scott McClanahan, the Sarah book, Clancy Martin's Bad Sex, David Shapiro's Supremacist. And the reason I have to say is because Giancarlo tragically died earlier this year. And since then, Tyrant Books, I mean, I'm not throwing any shade here, like you said, Matt, with Feral House, but Tyrant Books is effectively done. Just because one of my friends described it like this: literary publishers, literary magazines are not something that can just be sold or flipped, etc. They're like manic pixie dream girls. They're just something, quirky little things that you love for some inexplicable reason. And publishers of these small types, Feral House, Terror House, Expat, Tyrant, basically are extensions of the people who founded them and run them. Like Manny Morell is Expat Press. Giancarlo was Tyrant. Adam Parfrey was Feral House. I'm Terra House. And 40, 50 years down the line, when I pass away, and Terra House is still around, it's not going to be the same after I'm gone. If I sold it today to someone else, it would not be the same. Someone, even if it was someone who was like a close friend and was like, aligned with me in terms of what we liked, it would just not be the same. So, I mean, ultimately, I think that's with Feral House and Tyrant, the loss of their founders just kind of fundamentally changes the whole thing, because there's just so much of an imprint of them on what the publisher does. I ultimately curate everything that appears on Terra House. I have Danny helping me with magazine submissions, but with regards to like the short stories and poems we publish, the books we publish, that's all me. It's either stuff that I like everything, obviously, but it's stuff that I think would be interesting to a wider audience, or stuff that just simply deserves to be out there. I don't have the ability to determine in advance which books are going to be successful, unless, I don't know, someone on the level of BAP or Curtis Yarvin comes to me. It's like, yeah, I know your book will sell thousands of copies, but I sign books based on the basis of this book is good. It deserves to be out there. Even if it's something that would only appeal to a small audience, it's a book that deserves to exist. That's something that Chip Smith said years ago when he talked about his motivation for starting Nine Banded Books. And it's something I kind of keep to heart. You know, it's like the stuff we put out at Terra House, it may not always be the most, you know, broad in scope, you know, the most appealing to a wide audience, but stuff that I feel deserves to exist. It deserves to be read. It's something that deserves to be out there.
Right. No, and well, speaking as a writer who was published by you, it's like, yeah, there's something to getting it out there to a publisher, even a small publisher. It doesn't even matter necessarily how much you sell. There's a certain legitimacy to kind of getting the branded, publisher sticker on the back of your book. That is very validating, you know, as a writer, in a way that, like, you know, obviously you want to sell as much as you can, but just knowing that it's not just something you put out there, you know, all by yourself, but rather that you're kind of part of a broader community of writers. The social dimension of art I've talked about.
Yeah, you've been vetted, basically. Someone else decided to take a chance on your work, which is extremely invalidating. You know, which is why, you know, small publishers and literary magazines still exist and are thriving in our current environment. Even though theoretically, yeah, you can start a blog, or you can start I guess Substack is all the rage now. I never subscribed to anyone's Substack, by the way. But yeah, you can start a blog. Yeah, you can have a Twitter account. Yeah, you can publish all this stuff through KDP. But you're never going to get the same level of validation that you will from having a publisher say your work is good and then put the resources forth to get it out there into the world. You know, it's kind of like a good analogy would be like, you know, there have been some I guess libertarian types. You know, if you're familiar with Aaron Clary, he's another Manosphere figure. You know, he's a friend of mine. I'm not throwing shade on him, but he's all like, when it comes to publishing and stuff, why don't you just do it on your own? Publish your own books. You know, you don't have to go through gatekeepers anymore. And it's like, yeah, gatekeepers. A lot of gatekeepers are bad, but the problem is self-publishing is always going to have a certain stigma to it. It's like you're never going to. I mean, and I'm not saying all self-published writers are bad. I mean, we've praised a whole ton of self-published writers here: Rouge, Delicious Tacos, Bronze Age Pervert. But there's always going to be just a niggling thing in the back of like, oh, you're not really a good writer. You're just doing this for vanity purposes. And publishers serve an important role in curating this content, getting it out there, and also just taking the load off the writer. Because a lot of writers, they don't want to, you know, like hustle with like a million tweets a day and writing 2 blog posts a day and building up a brand like they're like some like their breakfast cereal or something. A lot of people just want to write, and that's where publishers come in. You know, like as a publisher, as the editor of Terra House, I'm the one who does all that stuff for you. I'm the one who gets your book out there. I'm the one who raises awareness of it. You know, me and Matt Lawrence are the people who make it professional. You know, we edit out your typos. You know, he does a really nice professional layout. You know, he does the cover art, you know, which is stuff that you'd either have to do on your own if you self-published, or you have to outsource it. And depending on the quality, like if you wanted to self-publish at the same level of quality that Terra House puts into our books, you'd have to spend upwards of $2,000, $3,000. You know, so we take that off of you. You know, obviously it's not it's obviously we're not doing it 100% out of the kindness of your heart. We're hoping to make a profit off of your book, but it's a mutually beneficial relationship where we help you get your work. We make something, you make something, everyone comes away happy.
Right. Well, let me give my testimonial then. I mean, look, I obviously, again, I'm just going to keep repeating it ad infinitum, I guess. I obviously published a book with Terra House, and it was a great process. I sent my submission in, you know, you guys took care of everything. But contrast that, I'm helping my friend Robert Stark put his sequel. He published a book that a lot of people on our corner of the internet are familiar with called Journey to Vapor Island in 2017. Good book, somewhat notorious, but people basically dug the book, and he's putting out a sequel now. And, he's got a decent following on his own, so he's not necessarily looking to go for, he's basically going to self-publish. I'm trying to help him with this. I cannot figure out the formatting thing for the life of me. Like, I'm trying to learn, because for my own purposes, if I'm ever, like, helping, a publisher or helping someone, like, it's something I want to know how to do, but my gosh, is it hard. So that's just my testimonial, having both.
Oh, Christ, yeah.
Yeah,
I tried to... Matt Lawrence does our books in Adobe InDesign, which you really need to in order to get a really professional a layout that's as quality as you can get from an official published book. Like, yeah, you can go to KDP and just upload it. He tried to teach me to learn it one day, and well, first off, the program, my computer's so old that InDesign just runs like molasses uphill in January in Alaska. But there's all this HTML coding, all these features, etc. Just looking at it gave me a headache. So I'm perfectly happy to let him do that. Same thing with the cover art. My aesthetic sense when it comes to art is like, oh, that pretty, me like. So when it comes to cover art ideas, I just have him read the book and come up with an idea on his own, because he's a professional artist. Like, he knows this stuff inside and out. We'll bounce ideas off each other, obviously, but like, I give him creative control just because it's something I just don't know. I know my limitations in life. I'm a good writer. I'm a good editor. At least I hope I am. That sounds really narcissistic when I say it.
No,
I know my strengths in life. I am not an artist. I am not a graphic designer. I wouldn't, if you had me put together a book cover, I wouldn't know the first place to start. So when it comes to things I don't know how to do, I get experts. I get people I can trust, people who put out quality work, and I just let them do it with just enough oversight to, here's what I need you to do. Go do it. And Matt Lawrence and I can do that just because we've been friends for over a decade. We've worked together tons of times. So even before Terra House, so like, we just know each other's working processes inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
If you can establish that kind of working relationship with someone, you're going to go real far.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. As we, I guess, move towards the end of the conversation, is there anything upcoming that you have, Matt, or you personally, but through Terra House as well, that you want to promote?
I mean, I have been working on a poetry volume on and off for like the past year. I was hoping, I'm like 99% of the way done with the first draft. It's taken a while just because I've got work and other things to do, but also because I'll admit it, I'm lazy sometimes. There's a quote that I've known writers who would brag about, like, oh, it took me 5 years to write this. Oh, it took me 10 years to write this. And Jordan Castro, the editor of Tyrant Books' online magazine, he had a great quote once. He said, if you claim it took you 10 years to write a book, all you're really saying is that you're an alcoholic. So I guess I'll just make that joke when this book sees the light of day. It's like, yeah, I worked on this for like 2 years, but like most of the time I was just playing video games. So maybe I worked on it 3 weeks tops. But nah, it's a joke. I've actually already debuted one of the poems. If you listen to Sean Kilpatrick's podcast, Shucks About Everything, I did a reading of one of the poems on an episode back in March. I think if you can search for it on YouTube. It's episode number 4, Love, with Matt Forney and Chris Moran. And Chris Moran is one of our writers as well. We published his poetry volume, Psyche Inspector, in September.
Right.
So that's a great book. Go check that out. But in terms of upcoming projects with Terra House, I've got 2 I want to talk about. Black Friday next week, at least I assume it's next week, depending on when this is put out. But we all know what Black Friday is. We'll be releasing our next book, which is Full Moon Reaction by Justin Jeffrey, which is a sort of tongue-in-cheek examination of culture and American history from a shall we say, a jaundiced hillbilly perspective. That's the best way to describe it. Justin's a really talented writer. We'll be putting up some excerpts on the site next week. We'll be running a print interview of him. It's just a book that's difficult to describe, which is, not the greatest way to sell a book, but when you read the excerpts, when we put them up on the site, you'll be able to see that. Also next week, we'll be in cooperation with Hans D. Schatz, who is a notable sci-fi writer, and he also contributed to one of our books earlier in the year, Ending Bigly: The Many Fates of Donald Trump, which is an anthology book that's about the fates the fates the 45th president could potentially suffer. It's a very entertaining book. In cooperation with him, we'll be running a Black Friday sale on all of our books. So if there's a title in our library, paperback or ebook, that you've just wanted to get, but you were waiting for a sale, your time has come. I expect to see all of you just clicking on the site, just sale here. You just gotta, and I expect to see thousands of email notifications. New sale recorded. But all of our books will be on sale along with the release of Full Moon Reaction next week, Black Friday week, Thanksgiving week, and in December. We're still working out an exact release date for this. We are publishing a memoir called In the Shadow of the Belt by Serge Claus. We serialized excerpts of this book on Terra House magazine back in 2019. Claus is one of our longtime writers. He's a Russian who writes a lot about his experiences growing up contemporary Russia and Ukraine. He's really, really interesting guy. I've always had an interest in that kind of literature. I mean, I grew up reading The Exile, Mark Ames, John Dolan, Edward Limonov, who's fantastic. Serge Claus's work is very much in that vein. In the Shadow of the Belt is his memoir of growing up in the Soviet era Ukraine in the 1970s, and basically all this hijinks he got up to. Like I don't want to judge Serge, but he seems to have run, when he was a kid, he seems to have run into people having sex in the woods an awful lot. And there's another chapter, and I'm not spoiling it because we've published these excerpts on the site. There's one chapter where he starts a pirate radio station in his parents' house, and the NKVD show up to investigate. Just really crazy stuff like that. He's just a really good writer. This book has been a long time coming just because it was difficult getting a reliable translator because Claus has pretty good English, but I wanted the published book to have it had to be immaculate because there's a lot of his English is pretty good, but it's not the best. I'd like to thank Dayani for that. She's in the process of translating the book and making it as good as it can be. So we're hoping to have that out by Christmas. In the Shadow of the Belt by Serge Claus. And we've got a ton of other great books coming up in 2022. You can go to the Terra House Press website and see our tentative schedule. And it's always very tentative. We're Terra House, for better or for worse, is very fly by the seat of our pants kind of deal. It's like usually our lead time from getting a finished manuscript to publishing a book is usually less than a month. There's actually one book, I forget the name. Which one was it? Oh, it was Spectres of Saturn. We turned that book around in 4 days. Wow. And it turned out pretty well, I might add. So that's one thing I'm really happy we can do. Thanks to Matt Lawrence, we can just turn around books really, really rapidly.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. Well, when it comes this Black Friday sale, I will certainly be promoting my book. Also, it feels like a reasonable time to add this. I don't think a lot of my followers necessarily follow me only as a writer. I'm also doing this podcast, but I will just throw it out there to put it into the world. For a while after finishing Dragon Day, I'd sort of not taken a break from writing, but I've been writing different sorts of things. But I am starting to put the pieces together of kind of what I want. Not even necessarily my next novel. Maybe it'll be a short story. Maybe I'll publish with Terra House. But I would just kind of throw that out there so people can hold me accountable because it's something I want to keep writing in this scene. hopefully 2022 you'll be seeing some new stuff from me.
It'll be on his OnlyFans.
It'll be on my, exactly, yeah. And Dan, obviously, I'll give you a chance to plug your book as usual. I mean, you're
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I am going to join you with writing my second novel in the new year. My first novel, Nutcranker, I am shopping around for a publisher, but I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, and I'm jumping into the next one. I have a few good ideas, and we're psyched.
Yeah, no, as Matt said earlier, I think it's a pretty good time to be a sort of writer or a publisher at our level. So,
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to commit myself to anything just because plans are always in flux. But who knows? Maybe in 2022 there might be a Terra House poetry reading,
Right.
or maybe
Awesome.
or maybe I will be making the rounds of some poetry readings. Like you'll just there'll be one in LA, and it's that Matt Forney guy.
right. Well, dude, I mean, like, I'm not that I'm like an event planner, but I've lived in LA a little while, so be in touch with me about that. I would love to put something together like that IRL. All right. Well, unless either of you have anything else to add, I think we can pretty much wrap it up.
Yeah, that's. I don't have anything else to add. But for those of you, the people who don't know where you can check out Terra House, it's terrahousepress.com for our books. Go to Terra House Magazine, terrahousemag.com. That's our literary magazine. We publish at least one new thing every day, usually two. We usually have a short story in the morning, and then in the afternoon we'll run some poems, something shorter, something breezier. It's timed and scheduled that you can read it at work. You can read it on the bus, on your phone. It's stuff that maybe you wouldn't want your mother to be looking over your shoulder, but like we don't post any nudie images or anything like that. We're not prudes. It's just I don't want the last thing I'd want is for you to get in trouble because a picture of a naked woman's popped up while you were on the metro or something. But yeah, you can check us out there. We publish a lot of stuff from a lot of different, a wide range of writers. If you're all about the social medias, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/terrahousemag, Instagram.com/terrahousemag if that's your thing. If you're on Telegram because you're afraid of the government, we're at t.me/terrorhouse. And we also have our own podcast, Terra House Radio. It's a live stream right now because that's what the kids like.
Mm-hmm.
But Terra House Radio generally airs every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We do our own interviews, and we also just have some shows where me and Bryden just insult each other and get drunk. So it's good fun all around.
Yeah, no, Terra House Radio is definitely a great podcast. I've been a guest on in the past, and yeah, we always worth a listen. So not only read Terra House titles, but also listen to the podcast. And with that, I think we're ready to close this.